intended to stand alone. It's intended to stand alone, but it will also serve to provide some background for an upcoming tour on April 29th, which is actually sold out. So I hope you got your tickets. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I just wanted to say that we are sitting here in the dining room of the Kappe Residence on Brooktree Road in Pacific Palisades. And it's a fitting location for this talk, as it was the direct predecessor to the Keeler Residence in terms of design concept and structure. I'd like to introduce my distinguished panel of speakers here today. I have with me Anne Keeler, who is the original client and the current resident of the Keeler Residence. Anne is a jazz singer and grew up in a beautiful modern house in Michigan designed by Alden B. Dow. Dow was the first recipient of the Frank Lloyd Wright Creativity Award in 1982 at the age of 78, and I encourage everyone to look him up. Anne says as a result, she has lived with exquisite details all her life, details that soothe the soul and please the eye. With her then husband, Gordon Melcher, she commissioned Ray Cappy to remodel their existing house for their family in Pacific Palisades. And yes, I said remodel. We're going to hear a little bit more about that from Anne. She has lived in the house ever since. We're also very fortunate to have with us Ray Cappy's wife and partner, Shelly Kappe. Shelly is an architectural historian and a founding member of the faculty at SCI-Arc. She has written extensively about California modernism for magazines such as LA Architect and Architecture California. She served as the inaugural director of the Architecture Gallery at SCI-Arc and curated a number of exhibits featuring both local and international architects. And finally, I want to introduce Finn Kappe, Ray and Shelly's son and Ray's business partner for over 30 years. Finn was raised in this beautiful house, so he knows this design language inside and out. He graduated from SCI-Arc, joined the family firm in the mid-'80s, and has designed and built numerous residences throughout Southern California, and recently completed the first Kappe house to be built in Europe, just outside of Berlin, Germany. He's taught at USC, UCLA, and SCI-Arc, and he was intimately involved with the design and construction of the Keeler Residence. And he's an accomplished musician as well. This event is brought to you by the Association for Women in Architecture and Design, as you heard. And I want to thank our generous sponsors for this event. Crosby Doe Associates, representing architect design properties for sale since 1974. Crosby Doe celebrates intriguing design from arts and crafts cottages to avant-garde contemporary estates. Chu Gooding Architects is an acclaimed architecture and interiors firm with an emphasis on cultural, arts-related, educational, and institutional projects. They are recognized for designing distinctive homes and sophisticated spaces. And Lehrer Architects LA has an approach to design that grows out of a deep love and respect for the community and unwavering focus on its improvement. Michael Lehrer, a longtime friend of Ray Cappy, designs to improve quality of space and quality of life. We could not have put this event together without your support. So let's get into it. I'm going to start right now with some questions for Shelly Kappe. Could you tell us a little bit about Ray's architectural career? How does he fit into the design trajectory of mid-century modern architecture in California?
Well, we always looked at the great modern architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, who was not California, but a big influence to all of us. Richard Neutra, Schindler, Harwell Harris, who Ray admired very much, Rafael Soriano. Yeah, that was the first, what I call like the first generation. And then there was a second generation, who I'm not, they're too numerous to name. And then Ray was really part of the third generation. And his many contemporaries, talented architects of Los Angeles. And maybe, you know, we remember these generations of architects, and maybe Ray will be remembered as a leader of the third generation.
That's lovely. I think we have a slide, great, we're looking at here. So that's the some images of this house that we're sitting in here now. And this is a City of Los Angeles historic cultural monument. And it occupies a relatively steep hillside in a canyon. Yet unlike other hillside houses in LA, it seems to float above the slope rather than benching into it. How did Ray develop this striking and unusual design?
Well, we fell in love with the canyon when Ray designed his first house here, the first of 10 ultimately that he did design and build. That was the Gates house. Gates Dorman, now owned by Al Dorman, who is a past president of what used to be Dim Jim. What's the current name of Dim Jim? But anyway,
You put me on the spot. I don't know.
maybe you'll maybe you'll remember Dim Jim. And so we decided that this would be a nice place for our house. We were kind of outgrowing our house in Sherman Oaks. And we found this lot here on Brooktree, and we bought it. And we didn't realize at that time that we had underground springs. So when we started to excavate for conventional construction, the water started coming up and everything sunk. And we discovered we had about 7 feet of non-bearable land. So he had to come up with an idea that could overcome that problem. And that's when he went to the towers. And there are 6 towers. And that's how the house was raised up. And so we do float in the trees.
It has such a feeling of a treehouse. And it's always amazing, no matter how hot and dry it is in LA, you come to this canyon and there's always water flowing. That must give you such a nice feeling.
The springs that start up in the mountains and come down all the way and then go into the ocean. So I used to worry about all the water floating down in the street. And then I realized that it's part of the ocean and the water cycle.
That's lovely. I think we might have a slide that illustrates a little bit of this for everyone to see. Yeah, it's a wonderful section perspective, I think, that Ray did that shows this construction with the series of towers and the house floating between it. So that's going to bring me to Anne.
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about what drew you to Ray Cappy as the architect for your family house. As I understand it, you'd already been working with an architect on a remodel to your family house. At some point, you decided to switch architects and approached Ray to complete or revise the design. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision?
I can. Well, so Gordon, my ex-husband, Gordon Melcher, always wanted to be an architect himself, and he was working with a then friend on the renovation plans for the house. And then we had a falling out with the then friend. And so we came over here to meet with Ray Cappy, and we had no idea who he was, what he stood for, how important he was. We felt like we were actually incredibly naive because we actually were hoping that he could finish, I think I hear, horrors, shrieks and whatever in the background. We actually asked him to finish the plans that had been started for our renovation. That's probably the only time in history anybody's ever come to Ray Cappy to finish somebody else's plans. Anyway.
What was his response to that?
He said, make up with your friend. And he left the room, and Gordon and I were sitting in their incredible living room, which maybe you can see behind us. And we're looking around, and we just said, we want a house like this. So we met with Ray, and he asked just basically a couple of questions, it seemed. We said we wanted 4 bedrooms, and Gordon said that he had always really enjoyed atriums in houses. And a few days later, he showed up with this amazing model and with a little tiny piano, a little black piano, and where the piano would be. And we were, it was just incredible, absolutely incredible. We were blown away. We were blown away by his ideas. We were blown away by the construction of the model, the whole thing. Just amazing.
So aside from the atrium, were there any other direction that you provided to Ray? And at what point did it become clear this was going to be an entirely new house? I take it when you saw this model.
Well, the 4 bedrooms. So that's what's so funny. It's just that, he was able to 4 bedrooms and the atrium, because we didn't give him much direction at all. I mean, we really were excited to see what he could come up with. And it was torn down in spring of '87. What started out as a renovation, we got very excited to see what he could come up with on our property. And I don't know if you said this before or whatever, but the location was really amazing. And there's greenery and privacy, and you could see Catalina Islands on really clear days. And it was really a wonderful location. So did I answer your question?
You absolutely did.
Okay.
And it's an interesting site in that, as I recall, it's got a entry both at the top and from the street, and you have quite a slope in between.
Yeah.
How did the original house work?
Same thing, except not as nice.
So you always had this double entry situation.
Always had the double entry. The stairs always bisected the sides. There was always a studio at the top. There's a library now. Then there's the living level, and then down below is the bedroom level. So that part was the same. The old house had all the ductwork on the outside of the house that I tore off in a frenzy. Like, well, we're going to get rid of it anyway. And it was freezing in California, as it turned out, without any heat at all. So we now have this beautiful house with internal ductwork, and I don't know what else to say.
So all in all, a winning solution.
Well, one other thing that's kind of interesting and scary is that the original house was 1.5 feet over the property line. So we had to actually buy that strip of property. Very close to our neighbors, and fortunately, they were nice people. So.
That's right. And I think that ended up being one of the remaining pieces or vestiges of that house.
Right. For it to be we got a variance because of that.
All right. So that kind of brings me over to Finn. And I just wanted to say that as an intro, I remember talking to a friend from architecture school one day when we were both in the middle of building models for our respective offices. And his model was constructed of planes of foam core with holes cut out of it for windows. And my model of one of Ray's designs was comprised of little teeny bits of basswood, creating each joist and post and beam. And the model of the house was essentially a model of the structure, and everything in between was just glass. Which brings me to the Keeler Residence. Can you talk a little bit about the design of the house? I think we need to start actually here, maybe with the original Kappe house. Would you agree?
I would agree. And interesting, there's about 20 years of difference between when this house was built and actually several others that are like this. And I think an interesting thing to know, if you're not aware of it, this house is kind of a prototype for my dad in terms of modular construction and building systems. And as my mom was saying, it was really the only solution that would get the job done on this unbuildable site. There's many other aspects. If you look at the plan, or maybe we can get a picture of it, or you could reference the site. And the point is that it's an orthogonal constellation of 6 towers, and 4 in the middle form this long rectangle that we're sitting in right now. And then part of it steps forward towards the street, and the other part is the bedroom towards the back. Meanwhile, this being a transitional site from high to low in the canyon has the topography sliding down at 45 degrees to the house itself. Now, when you look at the pictures, you'll understand how this operates and makes it so dynamic and interesting. But the organization, the system of concrete towers spanning between them with glulam beams and largely having everything open in between if you want, was the beautiful part of this organization. In Anne's house, they, after his like magical marketing job on you and Gordon, sending you away to make up with your friends, you know, which worked. They came back.
No, we never made up with that friend.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It worked
Oh.
because you came back.
Oh, okay. Oh, right.
And then it's interesting that you just really liked all the materials and the whole palette of this house. So ultimately, although Dad was very much a craftsman about building systems and so on, the sensitive decisions that he was able to make, which again, you see a piece of here, led to a finished result of really celebrating the qualities of the concrete, the wood, and the glass, and the different kinds of light that come into the house. Now, in this picture behind us, what's beautiful is the stairwell beyond. That's a concrete tower, but it's opened up and there's a skylight on top. So it has this amazing softness. And because the concrete is gray and light colored, it really adds to the floating characteristic of the wood parts of the house that are horizontally spanning. So that was wonderful that you wanted the same thing after all that time, after 20 years, as a familiar palette to him. Now on Anne and Gordon's house, as you just heard, it was a narrower site. And so this kind of multi-directional thing that happens in this house and several others that he did was not really at play in Anne and Gordon's house because of the narrowness of the site. It was more of a super dramatic shoot that went from top to bottom. And interesting to hear you remind us that there was a stair up the middle, because that's what you're seeing in the house now. So one more beautiful part to the work of my dad and others like him who appreciate this is the desire to have it be relatively seamless between the landscape and the architecture. And in Anne's house, it's literally a stairway that is continuously wandering up through this beautiful garden that she made from the street level up into the house and then all the way up to the back area where the carport is at the top side.
Could I just have you mention for a second, we're talking about concrete, the importance of like concrete towers in my house?
Yeah, well, the concrete was used and wood siding was used in these towers. Now the towers operate in terms of gravity loads and seismic forces within the structure. They're all compressed into those tower elements. So once you have those, everything else can be glass if you want it to be. Now I have to say, my favorite, and I think many people's favorite versions of this combination of materials are the houses with concrete towers. So what they do in your house, they're staggered to help frame your living room and then that lower family space. And I think, I want to ask you this, that how the glass steps out and then back like this? Do you remember? And the bedroom down below does the same thing. So I was thinking about it and I was suspecting that orients to a view and a way relative to neighbors next door. Do you recall?
Well, I have, big dense walls, but what I wanted you to do though is to tell people about 1994. And but why, and the incredible thing, nothing fell, nothing cracked, nothing broke. As you said, because the seismic load, and just to be able to, to mention that is that felt incredibly safe, because here's this huge earthquake and, your dad built it so beautifully and with, anticipating problems in the future, and there were no problems because of the way it was built.
Yeah, we've had tremendous luck in this house too. With the earthquakes that we've had, the system has performed very well,
Right.
Really well with all this glass.
Incredibly so.
So it's kind of interesting because I think you said that Ray thought of the Brooktree house as a prototype at one point, and we actually see it again then, as you mentioned, in being interpreted in Anne's house. Were there other houses that he used the system in?
Yeah, there are about a half a dozen houses that use the system, several in the canyon here with hillsides. The Sultan Price House, the Gertler House. There's a Fink house up in Montecito on a hilltop, and a couple others, but different system, but in the canyon, but different than this system, but a beautiful house. Katzenstein, similar. Yeah, that counts. That's a slightly different system as well. Got that one. So the difference being, again, what you'll experience if you go on the tour is on these houses, they're two-directional, sets of towers that sort of change the experience of the space on these hillsides. The beautiful part about these towers is they kind of tame these unbuildable, unruly hillsides. And then the way he kind of composed the house in between, just like a good constellation, not to overstate this, but in this house and others, just ends up being, if you connect the dots of that constellation and those stars, you get a pretty mystical, magical experience. And I think that's what happens. Oh, one more comment on this that I was thinking of earlier. Anne, I think, has talked about what a good companion her house is to her.
Buddy system.
The buddy system, she calls it. And there are other people who feel the same way about these houses. And I think that it's this beautiful combination of strength, the concrete towers, the glulam beams, open glassiness, but it's all that, and that was easy for my dad to talk about, the pragmatic decisions and those solutions. But the stuff that was sort of an internal thing, I think, is what makes it ultimately the good companion. These very sensitive decisions that he was capable of making, and many of them that ultimately lead you to experience the thing as a whole.
Yeah. We were just talking earlier about the fact that every time I come to this house, despite the fact that I actually was lucky enough, if you can believe it, to work here for 4 years or so in this house, but I always discover something new. There's always something that draws the eye and some play of light that I didn't notice before. It's really quite extraordinary. I think we have a shot, a slide of the stairs I wanted to bring up because the house is so striking when you see it from below with these enormous cantilevers and this experience, which hopefully some of you will get to arrive at the house, winding your way up the hill and between these beams. And do you remember, Finn, what was the rationale for shooting these beams out quite so far?
It's a favorite thing, for sure. Some of them carry roof loads, roof decks, and decks from bedrooms, but then extending further than that, there's a 70-foot glue lambs that Anne is remarking on. And in this house where we're sitting, this is a 75-foot span from end to end. It was, the horizontal direction, extension. There's many details that point at this kind of love of using material to the maximum and using cantilevers. It's a way of engaging space. So I mentioned before the relationship between landscape and the architecture and having them kind of one lead to the other and then back to the landscape again. And the symbiotic relationship between the two. I think the cantilevers are that as well, even though it's air, it's light and space. So it's not just the ground plane that's being dealt with sensitively that way. Cantilevers tend to do that for your eye and your experience.
But do you remember though, the codes changed, it seems like soon after we got approvals, so that we actually, if we were building the house a bit later, we couldn't have had it be the way it is because we wouldn't have been able to extend the cantilevers as much as we were able to. But so the codes changed. Do you remember by how much they were brought in?
It's that and many other things. So to take what happened here in the 60s and 70s and apply it to new buildings like yours and a few others, there's such a long list of things that you have to subtly address to maintain the qualities. The energy codes changed. So you have to come up with trade-offs for that. If you're using this much glass, double glass, insulated glass, the cantilever issue and the glulam beams being pressure treated now, if you want to use them on the exterior at all, several things. One of the fun things that I think you see some nice pictures now One of the fun things that Tracy and I got to work on with the detailing of Anne's house was the variations. So times change over 20 years, and also you try to
years.
improve if possible between 65
Oh,
and
yeah, sorry. Okay.
and when we built yours. So the detail of how you connect the glue lamps at the end of the cantilever and the rather beautiful stair systems, things like this. These are in the lower right, you can see an example of what is a glue lamp that has been notched out, routed out. And that is how we made the connection at Anne's house. Here we use miters and a bolting system. That was routed out, finger jointed, put together, and then with an all thread from top to bottom. This was our latest effort to come up with a good joint out there in the weather that would last. Similarly, on the stairs, we used that same idea to carve out glue lamps instead of many individual pieces for that stair. We thought we could do something a little more efficient.
Yeah, as I recall, almost everything on this house is custom designed and custom fabricated.
Like a good suit.
It must fit right.
Has to fit. Yes, exactly. So to me, it was just kind of astonishing to be drawing the details for the window systems. And I know personally, it has been a long, hard transition to get used to the nail-on window flange that everyone has to use these days, because I was used to thinking of these as something that you built on the site, and you built them lovingly and beautifully. And so I was hoping that, Finn, are there any other elements of the house or details that you find particularly interesting or you'd like to share?
Yeah, so many of them really. And just in terms of materials, for instance, at Anne's house, the door and window systems are made of teak, which is a stronger wood than what we have here, which is basically Doug fir on these wood frame glass doors and windows. And the height of that image, that's perfect. It's extremely tall and thin, that whole window wall. This is what the concrete towers, or when they are wood too, the sheer wall towers, but particularly concrete, is such a striking contrast to the openness. So that was one. The atrium, or the skylight down the middle, and the detailing that we did at the end of the built up double joists. I know my dad enjoyed how that ended up a lot. The glass floor, which started off with glass block, and a lot of work was done with that, and then we evolved to something more elegant, which was a thick laminated glass for the floor. That idea, of course, is that you're trying to drop natural light down to the downstairs level where the bedrooms are, and share that light from top to bottom. The house is, I wanted to say, it's so interesting. It's so dramatic in these images, but if you look at the upper left, you can see that the front door, I believe it's only 6'8" tall. And so the upper front door, or as Anne just told me, the back door, is 6'8", and then it just goes straight out from there. The beams that are located there above the door go straight out. And if you see the section, next time you see the section, you'll see that it's a double height space that we're viewing on the right. So those are a few of the details. I like the evolution of the material usage, the teak floors, glass floors, this finger jointed thing I was talking about earlier. These experiments, adventures, these evolutions of detailing to get the same look and result. I like all those efforts to, bring it up to date a bit and not lose, hopefully, anything from 1965, when you could do more with less, for sure.
One of the details that Anne mentioned she likes so much, and we'll give you a chance, Anne, here in just a minute to talk about your favorites, but I thought maybe, Finn, you could talk, if you recall, about the structural reason for the triple joist, roof joist system, which is so delicate and beautiful, and is actually used here as well.
Well, this is where it came from.
Yeah.
And it really helps with the span of the situation. And it was very necessary here on this ceiling because of the ultimate length of this span. You could build up these joists in a way to continue the distance where a solid piece of lumber could not do that. In Anne's house, we didn't we didn't have to do it that way. And Tracy, why don't you answer that question? I think you know
Well,
the answer to that question.
I was just going to check with you. My memory is that it had to do with a couple of things. Like here, there was a really long span at the upper library. And in order to keep the same depth, that had to be strengthened. But then, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it was also a really elegant solution to the need for blocking, because Ray loves the detail where there's no solid blocking between the joists and you get glass in between, but the engineer wanted blocking. And so it's blocked at the bottom and with a strap at the top, as I recall, which allowed for the glass. Am I remembering that properly?
That sounds pretty good. That sounds like the kind of thing we would do. Very, very subtle. You can cover up any hardware that's involved with the 2-1-bys and maintain the open glass clear stories like we have here. I don't know that you can see it, but
What I remember though, in the back, like in the library, is that you couldn't get a piece of wood to go as far as you're supposed to. So there are pieces of glass and then there are a piece of wood on the outside to attach. But in terms of blocking, seemed like in terms of earthquake stuff that things changed. And my memory is that with the concrete towers that, it's like if there were an earthquake, it'd be fine like in this direction, but not in this direction. So upstairs by the back door, there a piece of, sheet metal or, metal plates that sound familiar, painted black. But would you like me to talk with my hands a little bit? But I guess, but in terms of blocking, that's what comes to mind in terms of blocking,
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah, it
Surely.
takes all of us to piece it together. Unfortunately, without Ray here to tell us how he did it. Well, then I want to go to, actually, no, I had one more question for Finn before we leave you,
Oh, thank
which
you.
is what is your favorite aspect of the house?
Well, this is a big part of the overall gesture of the house is the skylight down the middle that we keep looking at, because there were limitations of that site. It was narrower than the other sites that I referenced where this building system was utilized. And to be able to do this and have that happen within the house, I just think that's ultimately what makes it super special. That palette of materials had been used before, but something that had such an invitation to capitalize on a 1-point perspective experience from the back door, particularly, but even coming up through the house from the below, the same thing. That is the uniqueness. I think that's what differentiates your house from many other houses. And along with that, the quality that you allowed it to be built with. These houses are conceptually, as a building system, capable of being built in a very simple way. But I think because Dad's pragmatism is so elegant at its core that there's this constant invitation to elevate the detailing and continue to use fine materials because the designs wear it so well, really.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm going to switch to Anne here now for a minute on that poetic note. And my belief is that this house is a great example of a successful marriage between architect and client.
Divorce aside, but go on.
No, between you and Ray Cappy.
Oh, that.
And you have been such a terrific steward of the house over the years. And in fact, you've continued to work with Ray and Finn over the years to modify, add on, and maintain the house. And I understand that your favorite compliment is that the house looks like you.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And both look in black.
It sounds like you and the house have quite a relationship going on, you and your buddy. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about what it's like to live in a house like this.
I can take, first of all, I just wanted to say one of the cool things about the house is simplicity. And like the granite and the bathrooms and the floor, we only use one kind of granite, and flame cut or polished. And so there's that simplicity. We do the same thing with the bathroom, kitchen fixtures or whatever. It's just all the same. So as he was saying, so the doors and the windows on floors were all teak. They had a lathe at the job. They built them there, but the like the closet doors are teak veneer. So we've got the glue lamps made of fir. The walls are such amazing redwood, and the ceiling, like what Tracy was just saying, when he was saying about like in the dining room, and just, you know, I love for people to come to my house at nighttime and to see the shadows, you know, because of the 3 pieces of wood, and it's really, you know, really exquisite. There, you know, concrete floor. There's the sandblasted glass floor. It's simple, you know, gorgeous, and then the concrete walls, whatever, just really, really simple, and as I said, you know, elegant and exquisite. And I think of the house as being like a piece of cabinetry, you know, that's very thought out, and it's just, you know, very skillfully put together. I mean, it took 4.5 years to build the house, but it's like a piece of cabinetry. And if you took away any of these details that may seem extravagant or they may seem unnecessary, if you took them away, the house wouldn't be the way it is. It's like, you know, all parts of the whole. You have to have all of those things for, you know, we wouldn't be sitting here right now talking about it if those details didn't exist. You know, if the time and the love, and I was telling Tracy earlier that there's such a connection between excellence and relationship. And I'll get to your excellent relationship, Ray, question in just a second. But the people who designed it, who worked on it, who've done the maintenance on it, you know, it couldn't happen without people of excellence. So it's been such a joy to have gotten to know Shelly, to have worked with Ray so many years that, you know, 35 years later, you know, we're still doing girls' night dinners at, you know, with Shelly. It's just been such a blessing, you know, working with Ray, and fun. I mean, it's just, you know, he's a fun guy. He was really smart and really talented, but he was a fun guy, and just such a blessing. Have I answered any of your questions? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so living in this house,
Oh,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
it is a glass house, and it, you know, that's in some ways kind of a Southern California ideal, as well as for us architects, an all-around ideal, which is this kind of blurring of the boundary between inside and
Well,
outside.
You know, I mean, even Philip Johnson living in the boondocks, like, you know, Connecticut, that would make me crazy, you know, just having windows. So my house, I do have blinds all the way around, you know, that are actually up right now for your tour, and the windows were just washed for the first time in like 15 years. And it looks great to be able to look out and to see the trees. But I'm a very private person, and I don't want people to see how much television I watch. So I have the blinds down a lot of the time. Am I answering your question?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, you are. And it made me think about how you've also landscaped the property, because some of my construction photos show it as pretty denuded during the construction process, and you would never know it because it's as if it's in a forest now. And
Right.
so I assume that's one of the ways you've also addressed this glass house, but at the same time need for privacy concerns.
So, first time Gordon and I saw the house on the hill, we stood at the bottom and we couldn't see the house because there was so much foliage. And then over, you know, time was like, got rid of it. And the only 2 trees, the only original trees were the palm tree that's still there. And there was a big old oak that eventually came out of the ground and had to be removed. So every single thing you see, all the giant, the timber bamboo, all the redwoods, all the oaks, the one, you know, well, except for the palm tree, everything's been planted. And so I'm just trying to not say something inappropriate. Anyway, there's I just really count on the foliage to like the illusion of privacy and the illusion of safety.
Yeah, it really works. It's got the tree house feel, and yet you still got those extraordinary views when you want them.
When you want them, right?
Yeah. So I know you're quite detail oriented as well, and we've
Very
heard
much
from
so.
Finn what his favorite aspects are. And what are you want to share some of your favorites?
Well, it's just so pathetic. Okay, the place where I spend the most time is my kitchen. And I have out of town jazz musicians staying at my house when they're coming in town for concerts. So the whole house is being used, and I need all the rooms. If I were there by myself, it'd be the kitchen, the laundry room, the bathroom, and the little guest room off the kitchen where I stay. I don't use the rest of the house because I've got what I need right there. When people come to my house, they always want to sit on the deck and eat because the view is fabulous. And it's, I only go out there when people come over and want to sit outside and eat. But I guess I'm probably not doing a good job of answering your question. There's so many cool things about the house that to try to choose it. Like, so the guest bedroom off the kitchen, snacks in the middle of the night, it's wonderfully close. So the bathroom I use right there between the kitchen and the guest room has a glass ceiling, and sandblasted like the glass that's throughout the house, but sandblasted. So to have natural light come through and is really spectacular. And I just wanted to say, I mean, going back to details, one of the things that was really frustrating is that a lot of the details here that you've had since 1967 that have worked beautifully since 1967, all of a sudden code saying, oh, you can't have a granite wall like this. You have to have clips. It's only for commercial use. It's not for residential use. Like, oh, if you're going to have like your shower, beautiful shower, concrete, your like jackhammered or whatever, the concrete that goes all the way down to your tile. They're like, oh, we either have to hot mop it or tile it. They have these requirements. It's like, no. And the same thing with stairs and railings and whatever. It's like, no, you have it in your house. These things work beautifully. That 20 years have gone by. How dare you tell us that these things don't work? They do work. We've seen them for 20 years. These things work. So anyway, that's been a frustrating thing to see. Yeah. To see what works in this house and then be told, oh no, you can't do it. It's like, but it works.
That reminded me of a moment in plan check when the plan checkers were a little bit mystified by some of these things as well. And I remember that some guy told me that, you can't have a deck that's deeper than 5 feet. And I thought, why not? And he said, well, I just don't think you can. And I said, but here's the structural calculation showing that it works fine. And we had to get a supervisor involved to tell him that, yes, it was okay for a deck to be deeper than 5 feet. It was mystifying. So yes, I completely.
Frustrating because, Ray was so brilliant and, and he was also so smart and he was so clever and he's a great problem solver. Is that fair to say? Great problem solver. And so it must
Microphone. Can't hear.
So frustrating for him to know what's possible and to be told that it's not. It's just, I think, very frustrating for him. It's frustrating for us, and we were just newbies. Yeah.
So I had just a couple more questions for Anne, and then we'll come back to Shelly a little bit. But you have a lot of art in the house.
Yes, I do.
Now, and what did Ray think of hanging art on his walls? I know you had an interesting situation growing up with in the house that you grew up in, and that architect's ideas about walls.
So I just read that to Shelly a little bit ago and asked what she thought. So Alden B. Dow, who was who did my parents' house. My parents had a modern art collection, and he came to visit the house after they'd started to hang things. And he was stroking the brick walls. And he said, my walls, my walls. my beautiful walls. And then it made me think, poor Ray Cappy, because I've got stuff all over the place, and we never talked about it. And I have this gorgeous redwood that grain is so tight that literally when it arrived, we were stroking it because it's so beautiful. And you can't buy it anymore. And initially we didn't want to put any holes in the walls because such precious wood. And so did Ray ever say anything to you about the multitude of things on my wall?
No, I think he would feel that whatever you want to live with in your house is okay.
Okay, that sounds generous. Yeah.
Well,
Please go ahead.
well, I've seen some of the artwork on your walls, and it's not mundane artwork. It's really nice.
You make it
Photograph it.
people.
There are a few, I think, but really nice work, of course. So when you're
Thank you.
talking about putting things, you made it a gallery downstairs basically. And so it's beautiful, and it's not randomly hung or anything.
No egg beaters in sight or whatever. Yeah, throughout the house.
So
I'm gonna
that
keep
makes it easy to
Yeah.
sort of appreciate you doing that. And there's everything is pretty tastefully done, and walls are for some artwork.
Well, Alden B. Dow, even though all the art that, was hanging at my parents' house is now in the Grand Rapids Art Museum, I'm sure he begs to differ.
Right, but that's interesting. Your parents also, had
They had an
tremendous
eye.
taste and
Yeah.
a wonderful collection. So what architect except Alan B. Dow has a big issue with that? I don't know. If you have museum
Probably
quality,
a little anal.
museum quality stuff hanging on the walls, that's nice.
Well, perhaps there was an ego involved. I don't know. Gang, what do you think? So-
Possessiveness,
So-
territorial, my walls. Wait, I thought
My walls are the high wall or like.
wall of the high wall.
So if houses are for art, I assume they're also for music. And I'm curious to know, Anne, you as a musician and someone who hosts musicians and hosts concerts, how do these houses perform?
Well, we talked about, because I think you and I talked about it in the very beginning. And we're talking about with like a sound engineer, I believe you were researching. Does that sound familiar?
Well,
Was that you?
in short, I mean, I think we agree that this palette of materials we've been talking about, the concrete, glass, and the wood, make for an incredible acoustic environment, right?
Well, I think the thing is, at some point in the beginning, it seems like we were talking with, like an acoustic engineer, which, totally wasn't necessary. I mean, as soon as, and I'm going to make a sound here. You ready? Whenever people come to my house, I always do that. And just to let them know that the acoustics in the house are great. And people love to sing, they love to play. They're, the grand piano, the house drums, or whatever. And it's really a gift and joy. Gordon and I, music was really important to both of us. And so it's a conversation we had with Ray about, music and, and acoustics. So did I answer your question?
It sure did. And that's funny.
Did
I
I
know,
demonstrate as well?
yeah. No, you commented early on about the little grand piano in the model.
Right.
And it was that grand piano, as I recall, moved all over the model
Yeah.
during design, trying to figure out and make sure there was a good spot for it. And
then we lost it. And I really, to this day, I mourn and grieve because it was darling. When people would come over and we'd show them the model, we'd always show them the little black piano because it was precious. And so when it disappeared, it was, it's a sad thing. I'm going to get over it eventually, but it was a sad thing. So thank you
yeah,
for the
and of
little
course,
piano.
you're talking about the little piano, not the grand piano, the
I
actual
am.
one.
I
It
am.
didn't disappear.
The little grand piano.
The little one. So Shelly, I'm going to come back to you. I know that you and Ray maintained clearly a close relationship with Anne over the years. And it sounds like Ray thought very highly of Anne as a client. And I thought you could give us some insights about their architect-client relationship from behind the scenes.
Well,
It was very good. You know, when Anne came to this house, it was after having lived in a beautiful house
Oh,
designed by a very talented architect who is a disciple of Frank Lloyd Wright. So she was a perfect client for Ray to work with because she was open to excellence in design. So, and that never changed. That never changed. She kept the house so beautifully and been such an open, generous host to so many events to give so many people pleasure, house tours and concerts and musicians visiting. So she was an ideal client and he loved spending time with you because he thought you were so much fun. So one of his favorite clients for sure.
just one.
Oh, that's really lovely. And I think we have a slide, maybe some images at the end here, are one of our last ones that shows an inscription that Ray, there we go, put in the book to Anne, which is a really lovely tribute, I think, to how he felt about working with you. And I'm going to embarrass you for just a minute and end here by telling a story. Because as I was working in the office, I wasn't necessarily part of the meetings, but it's an open space, as you can see, and so you could hear things. And I remember Anne making a comment, kind of a throwaway remark at some point about, you know, well, maybe next time I'll get my Laura Ashley cabin.
Oh, right.
And so I then proceeded to have several dreams in which you invited me over to the house years after it was completed, only to find out that you'd wallpapered everything with Laura Ashley floral print. So it wasn't just upholstery, it was actual wallpaper everywhere. And I had such a hard time in my dream responding to it because you wanted me to love it. And all I could think of was no. Anyway, clearly that is still to come, and the house is just as beautiful, if not more, as it was the day it was built.
But I had always wanted like pink and white striped sheets and wicker. And just really, because I grew up in a very contemporary house with, you know, mid-century modern furniture, but I'd always wanted a cottage on Lake Michigan. And so even though, you know, your horror did not come to pass in terms of the wallpaper, I did, on the other hand, have some pink and white striped sheets that, you know, floor. I was really, you know, horrible and didn't go with the house at all. But like as soon as I got divorced, I went out and shopped, and I and I got wicker stuff. And so anyway, 30 years later, they're, you know, in storage under my house. But anyway.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you all. I'm
glad to hear that anecdote because I always thought you were serious. You know, I heard you say that probably half a dozen times or
I
more.
think about that.
Yeah, and then so that's nice that you were able to do that for yourself, and that now it's under the
Out of my
house.
system.
So at this point, I want to turn it over to our audience and see if you all have any questions that we haven't covered here or thoughts about the Keeler Residence and this lovely house here, Brooktree, that you would like our guest to answer.
Tracy, we have a couple of questions in the meeting chat. One is, can you share the approximate cost and time it took to finish construction? I'm going to add to it how long it took to design it.
Well, knowing Ray, it probably took about 67 seconds to design. We were walking out of his, out of one of his new structures. We had just gone to the open house. And as we were walking out and, you know, looking around and there was furniture and everything, I said, is it exciting for you to see everything finished? And like, no, not really. And because the exciting thing for him was designing. And I said, so how long did it take you? And he said about 15 minutes. And I said, well, Okay, 30 minutes. And so, you know, in terms of, you know, concepts, obviously, you know, cabinet details were not done, you know, that quickly. But in his mind, and the exciting thing part for him was, you know, making those lines, you know, making those lines. And so to me, it seems like it was very fast, the design process. In terms of, you know, how long, well, it took 4.5 years to build, but as soon as I was no longer Mrs. Gordon Melcher, I started, you know, kind of going nuts in terms of, you know, building Waterfall and the music studio. Oh, I'll quickly tell you, but the music studio, because whenever I wanted to change something or add something, whether it was, you know, new lighting or cabinetry or whatever, I'd always ask Ray to come over, and he'd always come over. And so, so kind of our classic exchange was I asked him to come over because I wanted to excavate the space under the boys' bedrooms to create a music studio. And I asked if we could drop a concrete wall edge of the boys' bedroom deck, you know, to create the space. And then Ray's classic line was, I designed these open spaces and people keep filling them in. And then my response was, Ray, it's Southern California. We can't afford open spaces. So the bottom line is it's hard to know how much it costs because there's the original 4.5 years, but yet I've been, you know, working and fine tuning and customizing the house for me for so many years that I could never, ever give you a total. And then there's, of course, all the maintenance things, you know, a lot of wood, you know, a lot of wood. So, so more than $1.95, less than 50 million. How about that? Is that?
And I will say for those of us practicing today, it's kind of amazing to think about, but my recollection is that the drawing and permitting process was less than a year, I would say. Does that sound about right, Finn? Yeah, you know, compared to what goes on today, it was so fast.
But probably not as fast as it could be if he didn't have like special, beautiful designs, things that they questioned or challenged, right? I mean, I would think that made the process take longer. If you were just a guy saying, you know, I'd like to have, you know, white, you know, drywall, just everything with drywall and whatever.
I don't know. The only issue I recall was the deck being more than 5 feet. That was the only thing they questioned, if you can believe it. I know there were other comments, but that's the one that I recall being particularly unusual or surprising.
Apropos of his being quick as a designer, he's always very quick. And with this house, before we discovered this underground springs, he had designed the house with conventional footings. With the advent of our being aware of the water, he had to redesign, and all this took place within the space of a week.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of the house and how to build it.
And Shelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but that change was not just footings, but this change to a series of towers that supported the house floating above the grade. Was it that big a change?
Oh, yes. Yes. And then using lam beams was very unusual at that time because it was considered an industrial material. Yeah. So here with the 6 towers and the lam beams bolting into the towers, and the house really floated up the hill.
Yeah. Did we have any other questions, Magdalena, or did we?
Yes, we do. And one additional question is very pragmatic. Do you have problems with termites? And how was there anything done, any separations, anything geometrically to prevent termites from coming up from the soil?
when you say geometric, I guess I don't understand what you mean.
For example, a footing extending a certain amount of inches above the soil, or some copper sheets, or separating the footing. Anything was, and maybe you don't have too much of a problem because of the material from which, you know, some parts were built.
Well, funny you should mention termites. So definitely have had and continue to have issues with termites. The problem is, for years, I would walk by wood. And it's like, yep, dry rot. Yep, termites. And I keep walking. So it took me a long time to, be responsible. So by the time it was time to redo things, there had been so much damage. I mean, Finn and Ray came over one time, and the bedroom deck, the master deck, was held together by ropes or something, right? And we were, do you remember that? Anyway, but we came over because the wood inspector guy said nobody should even walk on this because there had been so much damage because I hadn't paid attention to things. So I guess my point is that, yes, there have been termites. I feel like so much of the termites have been because I was irresponsible. And there's nothing, I think like where the concrete towers are, it was, concrete soil. Other places, redwood or, there was, to answer your question, there was nothing to prevent termites coming into the house, if that's what you're asking.
Thank
So.
you. This is more than I think we were asking.
I hope it's not too much. Okay.
No. In
Okay.
the sense, so I'm just going to say, please type anybody, participants, any questions you might have in the meeting chat, and we will just ask the question. And I'm going to ask a very basic question. Your favorite spot in the house, what is it? And is it during the day or is it during the night? Spring,
I really can't.
fall.
So I'd say at nighttime, it's my bed in my room, but it's like, there's so many wonderful, surprising, cool spots in the house that it's like I've been there for 30 years and I'm still kind of discovering and appreciating. And like, to go back to this thing about the ceiling in the dining room at nighttime. I love looking up and seeing the shadows, the repetition of the shadows. And when people come to visit my house, I love for them to see it in the day when the glass floor kind of has a light blue hue to it, but at nighttime, it has kind of a white hue to it. And in the day, you can look out and you can see all of the greenery and it's a said Catalina Island, and it's wonderful. But I really like it when people come at night because I talk about how the house kind of wraps its arms around you. It's dark, but it's, it's intimate. You only see what you're choosing to illuminate. The light on the concrete is very cool and wonderful, but the light and all the redwood is warm and fabulous. And it's just, I love it. I'm very, very grateful to, so very grateful. Can I just say one thing about gratitude? Why not? Okay. So this ring that I'm wearing, it's the first time I've ever worn this ring. And because I wanted to represent my parents. And my parents who had the Alden B. Dow House, and they were a great supporter and advocate of the arts. And even my mother had a governor appointed job, art and public places. So the point is that it's what I grew up with, like Shelly was saying, the kind of house in which I grew up, with the, attention to detail and piano hinges used for all the, for all the closet doors or whatever. It's just on and on and on. Again, details that seem unnecessary, but they're part of the whole, and the houses would not seem to be the same without them. And
Can I break in for just a minute and just say what a dream it is as an architect to have a client who notices and appreciates these things?
nice hinges. But I guess my point is that, you know, I'm so grateful to them, because if it weren't for my parents, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, because I wouldn't have the eyes, I wouldn't have the heart, I wouldn't have the desire, I wouldn't have the passion, I wouldn't have the appreciation for all of this if I didn't grow up with all of that. And my parents with an open door policy with, you know, artists and musicians and, you know, coming and staying with us. And I guess my message would be, you know, share your passions with your kids, because that's the model. You know, I grew up with that, and I feel like it's not about me at all. I mean, thank you for trying to give me some credit. I feel like all the credit goes to my parents. So next question, there you go.
No, you can see why she was one of Ray's very favorites.
Just one?
And we didn't get a chance really actually to dive into too much of the changes that you made over the years to the house, but I wanted to point out that one of the extraordinary things that Anne had Ray and Finn help with was converting the area under her driveway, which for most people is just a dank, dark, you know, strange place that you don't want to go to. And she converted it into this lovely grotto and spa that draws light from glass in the actual driveway itself. And it's pretty special, Anne. So I think you've really taken it and run with it, the two of you.
Well, what had happened, and not to bum anybody out, but the original driveway, I guess the concrete and the wood somehow weren't friends, and it was starting to sink. And so the whole thing had to be taken out. And so the glass that's in the driveway now wasn't originally there. And I loved the kind of the construction bridge, and I loved the idea of a bridge. And I asked Ray, can we do that? I said, sure. So, so the glass in the driveway is actually only 1/4 of an inch thicker than the glass in the house, but I can drive on it. I can park on it. So what she's saying is that, so now I have this fabulous glass above my head. And I love the quality of the light, but there's nothing to do. So then, you know, this stone wall and the waterfall came out of that, and the spa. So all of this would have been considered to be kind of useless space. And it's beautiful. You know, I kind of feel embarrassed, because I feel like, you know, like nobody has taken more advantage of a property than I have, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, and a little plug for how amazing it is that Anne has offered to open this house up for a tour, because truthfully, there really aren't any photos that do all of these things justice. So thank you again for your generosity.
And you don't get to hear me say, you know, like that.
Oh, that was extremely poetic. Thank you for that. We have 2 more questions. If we have time, Tracy, you be the judge. Yes?
Yes, I think it's fine. Yes, sure.
All
I'm
right.
feeling pretty
So,
chatty.
okay. So the questions are, any heating, cooling issues, and did Ray design any furniture in the house?
Well,
I didn't get that.
furniture.
Furniture.
Yes.
Did Ray design any furniture in the house?
Oh, yes.
Yes, when we
Everything.
when we were moving in, we asked him to do that. So he did the dining room table. He did 2 rectangular coffee tables. He did these were with glass tops. So the structure is teak. The tops are glass. A square glass coffee table. And the crazy thing is that, you know, it's like years went by when I realized, oh, I don't have side tables. Ray, could I have side tables? And a minute and a half later, my cabinetry guy was able to come up with these beautiful 6 tables, 2 with glass top, or 4 with glass tops and 2 with teak tops. And, you know, just beautiful. So heating and cooling issues, because the house is so exposed, as opposed to kind of a regular house where ductwork and things can be hidden, that's not the case. And so over the years, I've like one night, and this is before I had indoor cats. And so the back door and the front door were open for cross ventilation. And I had him come over because I wanted to have blinds, electric blinds put over the skylight. And it was 8:30 at night and it was still hot up there because I needed to like prove my case that, I needed to do something. So, so anyway, so the blinds were there and so that helped the light come in, not, come in the house, but the heat was still coming in. So then screens were put on the outside. So we did that for years and then did these little gull wing windows at the top. And that really helped a lot to, get heat out of the house. And then worked with a new air conditioning guy who was able to take the air conditioning that was 2 floors down and push it upstairs. So upstairs was so cool that literally it was so cold that I had to leave the room for the first time ever. So, so the heating has been great. The air conditioning has been kind of a challenge because it's, 3 floors. There's there's, the whole heating AC unit for the bedroom level. And then I don't know if this is interesting, but the second and, top level, the library level, they have their own unit. And so I am able to control where the heat and the air conditioning go. But there have been issues in terms of, heat and so much glass, if that's kind of what you're wondering.
Yeah,
No, I talked about the furniture.
but I think Shelly wants to
Talk about the furniture. some more?
add a little bit about
Okay.
the furniture.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's gorgeous.
Well, Ray never thought of himself as a furniture designer, but everything he did in our house and Anne's house was just organically grew, and he would design what was needed. And we appreciated it. We didn't think too much about it. But a few years ago, a client of his, the Berlin client, came and started looking at the furniture in our house and Anne's house, and he decided he wanted to reproduce them. So there is now a Ray Cappy furniture line produced in Berlin, all handcrafted. I think Lars's website is Original in Berlin, if any of you are interested. The designs are taken from those that he designed for our house and the Keeler house.
Expertly measured. Came and measured everything.
Yes,
Very precisely.
Beautifully handcrafted.
That's wonderful. So they'll live on. Magdalena, did you say there was another question? Or were those the two?
Yes, those were the two.
The two, we got them all together. Okay, very good. Well, I guess I'm going to wrap us up here, and thank you everyone for joining us on this journey and getting to learn about a little about Ray's design process. There's much more to learn, and more about the Keeler House. So I want to thank our guests so much, Kappe, Anne Keeler, and Shelly Kappe. Number one, for being here and doing this with us and sharing their stories, but also to Shelly for opening up your house to this as well. So I appreciate both of you so much. And I want to once again thank our sponsors, Crosby Doe, realtors who specialize in these beautiful architectural houses, Chu Gooding Architects and Lair Architects LA. Again, your support for events like this is really important, and we couldn't, of course, do these without you. So thank you again for coming on board. And I want to thank our guests very much.
Can I just say something?
Please.
I just wanted to thank Shelly. No, really, because you guys have been such a team all your lives, and who knows what he actually would have accomplished without you.
I agree.
As an early member of Women in Architecture, it's a pleasure to welcome this event.
I completely forgot to mention that. Shelly told me just before this started that she was a member of AWA before we had the D. So this is a really nice circle for you.
Mhm.
Well, on behalf of the board and programs, thank you for being an AWA member. And we would love for you to actually come as an honorary member at some of our events. So, it would be wonderful. So thank you.
so much.
And also, I want to thank Tracy Stone. Without her, this would not happen. So we thank you for putting all this together. And again, thank you so much for opening the house, because that's such an intimate space also, and sharing this with our membership and with others. So thank you. Thank you. Big thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. And we're going to finish and see each other this weekend. Everybody who is coming is very much excited to be part physically of the home, of your home. And thank you again.
You're welcome.